My son-in-law poured my wine at dinner, but earlier that day, I saw him with my medical file at the pharmacy. He didn't see me, but I saw enough. So I switched our glasses and waited. My name is Lorraine. I'm 67 years old, a retired librarian, and I remember everything. Not in a photographic way, not like some dramatic movie character with supernatural memory, but I remember people. I remember tone. I remember faces. And I always remember when something feels off. It's the quiet details that people miss, how someone tilts their head when they lie, or how their voice smooths over when they're covering something up. I've spent my life reading books and reading people. And lately, I've been reading my son-in-law, Jason. Jason married my daughter Ellen a little over a year ago after her divorce. He swept in like some Hallmark prince, tall, overly polite, generous with compliments, and always helping. Too perfect. Too quick to smile, too good to be true. At first I chalked it up to suspicion. I didn't want Ellen to get hurt again. But something about him always rubbed me the wrong way. He talked more than he listened. He insisted on managing everything, from their bills to Ellen's medications to, eventually, mine. And I noticed that slowly, Ellen started deferring to him on everything. Jason says this. Jason thinks I should. Jason's taking care of it. She's always been independent, fiercely so. But since marrying him, it's like her fire dulled. She was still my daughter. But there was something dim behind her eyes, something tired. A few weeks ago, I started feeling dizzy on and off. My heart condition requires a very specific combination of meds. I've been taking them for years without issue, but something felt off. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Then I noticed 2 of my pills looked different. The color was slightly off. The shape was unfamiliar. I scheduled an appointment with my doctor, but the next available slot was days away, and then, on the day of the dinner, I saw him. I was walking out of the bookstore near the pharmacy, one of my favorite quiet spots in town, when I saw Jason inside through the glass window. He wasn't there picking up a prescription. He was talking to the pharmacist, and in his hand was a manila folder. My name was on it. I stood there for a moment, frozen. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was picking something up for Ellen, but my gut twisted. I know that folder. It's the file my doctor's office uses, the kind they send over when someone authorizes release of records. My heart pounded. I stepped back so he wouldn't see me. I ducked behind the stone pillar outside the window. I waited until he left. He didn't see me. But I saw him. That evening, we were invited to dinner at their house. Just a small meal, Ellen, Jason, and me. Ellen said Jason had cooked a roast. He greeted me at the door, cheerful as always, and helped me out of my coat. "You look lovely tonight, Lorraine," he said, his smile razor sharp. "Come sit. Let me pour you some wine." He held up a bottle of red and 2 glasses. "This one's special," he said, "aged perfectly." I watched him. Every motion felt rehearsed, smooth, too smooth. He poured a glass for Ellen, who was still putting the finishing touches on dinner. Then he poured a glass for me. Then he poured his own. I watched the sequence, watched the placement of each glass, watched which bottle he used. Jason turned to stir something in the kitchen. That was my moment. Without saying a word, I stood up, walked to the counter, and swapped our glasses. I returned to my seat. My hands were steady. My heart? Less so. Jason walked back in, picked up the glass he thought he poured for me, and smiled. "Cheers," he said. "To health and family?" I nodded, raised my glass, and pretended to take a sip. He drank. Fully. One smooth swallow. For the next few minutes, everything continued as usual. We ate. Talked about the weather. He asked me questions about my gardening. Ellen laughed at a story from her job, but my eyes never left him. Halfway through the meal, I noticed Jason dab his forehead. Just once. Then again. He reached for his water. His hand trembled. It was barely noticeable. Anyone else might have missed it. But I didn't. I didn't know what he'd planned. I didn't know what he put in that wine. But now he'd drunk it himself, and I was going to find out exactly what he intended for me. Jason smiled through dinner like nothing was wrong, but his skin began to betray him. It started with that light sheen of sweat on his brow, barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. And I was. Every muscle in my body was alert, coiled like a spring. His hand trembled slightly as he raised his fork. He missed his mouth once and tried to play it off like a joke. "Long day," he chuckled, blinking too many times. I gave a soft laugh in return, not because I found it funny, but because I wanted to see if he was sweating because he was guilty, or because whatever he had slipped into the wine was beginning to take effect. Ellen didn't notice anything. She was going on about how Jason had cleaned the house, made dinner, even ran errands for her. She looked so proud, so in love. And I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet. I took careful bites of my food. My wine sat untouched. I swirled it around in the glass occasionally, just to keep up appearances. Jason's eyes darted toward my glass once or twice, noticed it still full, noticed I hadn't touched it. He tried to hide it, but there was a twitch in his jaw. A tiny moment of tension quickly smoothed out. "Not enjoying the wine?" he asked. "Oh, I'm savoring it," I smiled. "It's strong. I didn't want to drink too fast. I have to be careful with my heart meds." There it was, the flicker in his eyes, just a beat too long, just enough to tell me he was recalculating. "You're right," he nodded. "We should all slow down." He pushed his glass slightly to the side, didn't touch it again. But the damage was already done. His hand still trembled when he reached for the salt. He was blinking more frequently, and he excused himself from the table halfway through dessert, saying he had a weird headache. When he walked out, I leaned forward and watched him. His gait was just a hair off. He bumped into the doorframe. I waited. A minute passed. Then 2. Poor guy. Ellen sighed, sipping her wine. "He's been running around all day. You know, he even stopped by the pharmacy to pick up something for you, your refills." I kept my face still. "Really?" I said gently. "That was kind of him." "He's trying so hard to win you over," she said. "You've always been a little distant with him." I smiled sadly. "I suppose I have. Maybe I'm just a little too old to trust quickly anymore." Jason never returned to the table. I told Ellen I should be heading home. She offered to drive me, but I told her I needed the walk. That fresh air would help clear my head. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for coming, and closed the door behind me. As soon as I was alone on the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone. I wasn't going to call anyone yet. I just needed to check something first. I opened the health app Jason had encouraged me to install on my phone months ago. I'd never trusted it fully, but I let him sync it to help monitor your medication schedule, as he put it. Tonight, I looked through the data. He'd updated my dosage reminders 2 days ago, increased dosages, altered timing. It was subtle, but it was there. I felt sick. Not from anything I'd consumed, but from the implications. If he had access to my phone settings, to my pharmacy records, what else had he done? I got home, locked the door, and went straight to my medicine cabinet. I opened each bottle carefully, laying out the pills on a paper towel. 2 of the pills looked slightly different than usual. One was shaped more like an oval now, and another had a faintly different imprint. I held them under the kitchen light, then took pictures. I wasn't imagining this. Jason had changed something, or someone had swapped the meds, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't just about control. It wasn't about forgetfulness. It was about elimination. But why? Money? Ellen's inheritance? The life insurance policy she barely remembered existed, but I never removed her from? I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing. I couldn't confront him directly. Not until I had proof. I opened the top drawer in my nightstand. Inside were 2 small nanny cams I had bought when my granddaughter stayed over years ago. I'd kept them tucked away in case I ever needed to keep an eye on things. I needed them now. The next morning, while I knew Jason would be at work, I made a quiet visit to Ellen's house with a spare key she'd given me years ago, back when trust hadn't been a question. I installed one camera in the kitchen, behind a row of cookbooks. The second I placed inside the air vent cover in the guest bedroom, my room when I stayed overnight. I left no trace. Back at home, I set up a separate file on my laptop. I labeled it, "If Something Happens to Me," and in it I wrote down every detail I had so far. Photos of the pills, screenshots of the app data, a timeline of what I'd seen, and notes about Jason, because if I was going to catch him, I had to be careful and patient. He thought I was just an old woman with a weak heart. But I've read enough mysteries to know the killer always underestimates the quiet one. For the next 2 days, I kept my phone volume on low and my smile perfectly fixed. I didn't let on to anyone that anything was wrong, especially not Ellen. She was texting me pictures of her dinner, asking if I wanted to join them next weekend, telling me how sweet Jason was being since his little headache. Little did she know her husband had drunk the wine meant for me. But he recovered quickly. That was the terrifying part. Whatever he had slipped into the glass, it wasn't lethal. At least not in one dose. It was subtle, slow. A whisper instead of a bang. And that told me something. This wasn't the first time. I didn't want to believe it, but my instincts were too sharp to ignore. I opened my laptop and began what I called a passive audit. It's what I used to do at the library when we suspected a staff member was mishandling rare materials. We didn't accuse, we observed. First, I made a list of all my prescriptions. I cross-checked the bottle imprints with official FDA pill identifiers. 2 of them had been replaced by nearly identical generics. Same size, same dosage, but slightly different effects. One had sedative properties if taken improperly. Then I called my pharmacy. I asked to speak to the same technician I'd worked with for years, Miguel, a sweet young man who always called me Miss L. Have there been any updates to my profile recently? I asked gently. Miguel paused. Actually, yes. A few weeks ago, someone called and said you needed adjustments to your prescription schedule and asked to authorize generic substitutions. I went cold. Who called? I asked. He hesitated. They said they were your son, that you'd asked him to handle it since you were having memory problems. I nearly dropped the phone. Memory problems? I don't even use the same brand of toothpaste twice in a row without noticing. I thanked him, asked him to email me the logs, and hung up. Memory problems. My foot. Jason wasn't just toying with my medication. He was setting the groundwork. If something happened to me, there'd be a trail suggesting I was deteriorating. And Ellen? She'd never question it. Jason was smart. He didn't just isolate me. He made sure the narrative was plausible. I copied the pharmacy logs into my file. Then I emailed my doctor's office. I didn't call. I wanted everything in writing. I asked for an itemized record of my last 6 months of prescriptions, dosage updates, and any notes or correspondence received. It took a day to get a reply. When I opened the attachment, my jaw clenched. There it was, in black and white. 3 weeks ago, a request to alter my dosage and list a new emergency contact, Jason Bennett, my daughter's new husband, my fake son. My emergency contact. I sat with that for a long time. My tea went cold on the table beside me. This wasn't some random error. He'd planned this. He'd been slowly tightening the noose around my life. One phone call, one altered dose at a time. I opened the footage from the 2 small cameras I'd placed. Nothing the first day, but on the second, I watched him. Jason came home earlier than usual. Ellen was still at work. He walked into the kitchen and pulled open the cabinet above the sink where I kept my pills during my visits. I watched him unscrew one of the bottles, look at the label, then pull something from his pocket. Another bottle. He swapped a few pills out and resealed mine. Then, he poured himself a glass of water, held it in front of the camera without even knowing it, and dropped one of my pills into the glass. He watched it dissolve, then poured the water down the sink. My fingers shook as I paused the video. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't an overstep. This was deliberate. I saved the footage, backed it up on 2 drives, uploaded it to cloud storage, sent a copy to a locked email folder, and then I sat very still in the dark. I had enough to go to the police, maybe even a lawyer, but I needed Ellen to see it herself. If I went to the authorities now, she might side with him. He was her husband. She loved him. And love makes people blind. So I made a decision. I would gather a little more. Just a bit. And then I'd let Jason bury himself. That weekend, Ellen invited me over for lunch. Jason wouldn't be there. He was out running errands, she said. I brought her flowers and hugged her a little tighter than usual. And I smiled as I asked if she could show me where she kept the old photo albums. While she fetched them from the attic, I slipped into the guest room and double-checked the camera's angle. Perfect. Next time he touched anything of mine, I'd catch every second of it. Because now I wasn't just surviving, I was watching. And Jason? He had no idea the woman he tried to erase was already building the case to destroy him. I didn't sleep that night. Even with all the footage and the pharmacy records and the pill comparisons, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing Jason's face smiling across the dinner table, offering me a glass he expected would end me. I kept seeing his fingers around that wine stem, steady, casual, poisonous. He didn't fumble, he didn't hesitate. That was the part that haunted me most. He didn't look nervous. He looked practiced, and that raised a deeper question. Was I the only one? I started revisiting past moments like they were crime scenes. All those times Jason insisted on driving me to appointments. How he'd offer to pick up my prescriptions without being asked. The way he'd ask if I'd taken my meds in front of Ellen, saying it like he was caring. But watching me so carefully. There were nights I'd stayed at their house only to wake up more tired than I'd been the night before. Drowsy. Off balance. I used to blame age or stress. Now I wasn't so sure. So I opened a notebook and began documenting it all, every moment I could recall that seemed odd or unnatural. Then I lined it up against Ellen's bank statements and Jason's job history. That's when I noticed something else. Jason didn't have a real job. He had titles, yes. Financial consultant, independent analyst, entrepreneur. But nothing stuck. His LinkedIn page was a string of vague positions that couldn't be verified. And when I looked deeper into property records, business filings, I found nothing with his name on it. No assets. But then I found a paper trail. Ellen had added him to her account 6 months after they married. She never mentioned that to me, not once. And right around the time he was listed as my emergency contact, she had co-signed a life insurance policy that included me. It was under a family trust, which meant if I passed, the money would go to her and by extension to him. I sat back in my chair, my chest tight. He wasn't just trying to kill me, he was building a net, a soft one, padded with caring and legal authority and fake professionalism, so that if I slipped and fell, no one would ask questions. He'd already framed the narrative. An elderly woman with heart issues, fading memory, increasing clumsiness, sudden death, natural causes, except they wouldn't be. I closed the browser and walked to my medicine cabinet again. This time I opened each bottle and dumped them onto white sheets of paper. I separated every pill by type, shape, and color. Then I checked the bottle dates, the prescribing doctors, the lot numbers, and 2 things hit me at once. First, 3 bottles had batch numbers that didn't match my online pharmacy records, meaning someone had refilled or replaced them behind my back. Second, one of the pills, the one I take for blood pressure, had a faint, chalky smell. I crushed it between 2 spoons. It turned to powder too quickly, not the way a proper coated tablet should. It disintegrated like a counterfeit. I placed it into a small plastic bag, labeled it, and put it in my safe. Then I opened the camera feed again. This time, I fast-forwarded through the evening hours at Ellen's house, and that's when I saw it. Jason entering my guest room after dinner. He moved quietly, like he'd done it before. He opened the drawer, pulled out my pill organizer, opened Monday, removed 2 pills, took out something from his pocket, inserted new ones. Then he closed it, looked around the room, and smiled. I paused the video and stared at that smile. That was the moment it all changed for me. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about power, control, erasure. He wasn't killing me for greed. He was doing it because he could, because he believed I'd never stop him. And maybe that was my fault. I'd spent years being polite, non-confrontational, the nice mother-in-law. I didn't rock the boat. I didn't pry. I respected boundaries. But that time was over. I printed 3 stills from the video. One of Jason opening the drawer, one of him holding my pills, and one zoomed in of his smile. I taped them into my journal with a single note underneath. He's done this before. Because deep down, I believed it. Maybe not to someone in his own family, but somewhere. Some woman, some parent, some unsuspecting soul had trusted him, and he'd used that trust to climb, to steal, to survive. But I wasn't going to be one of them. Not anymore. That night, I cleared the guest room at Ellen's. I emptied the drawer, replaced the pills with decoys, and left the camera rolling. I wanted one more recording, one last confirmation. Then I called my attorney. I need to update my will, I said, and I want to put something in writing that will only be opened if I die under suspicious circumstances. He didn't ask questions. He knew me well enough not to. Then I sat back, folded my hands, and waited, because Jason had just set the table for his final act, and I would be holding the knife. Telling your child that the person they love is dangerous is one of the hardest things a parent can do. But sitting back while that danger grows inside your family, that's even harder. I spent 2 days preparing, not just with facts and files, but with words. I practiced how I would say it in the mirror, adjusting every sentence until it didn't sound like an accusation. I wanted Ellen to feel safe. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't judging her, that I wasn't attacking her marriage, that I was trying to save her and myself. Because despite everything Jason had done to me, the worst part was how he'd gotten to her. How he'd built this cozy little world where she felt cared for, protected. How he wrapped control in compliments and buried manipulation under acts of service. That's what made him dangerous. I invited her to my house for lunch. Just her. No Jason. She brought her usual warmth, a smile, a bottle of orange juice, and a little bundle of peonies from her garden. My favorite. "You've been quiet lately," she said as I poured her tea. "Is everything okay?" I smiled. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you." Her face shifted. Subtle tension. Her guard went up. "I want to say something," I began, "and I need you to really listen, not as a wife, not as a daughter, but as someone who loves the truth more than comfort." She looked wary now. "Okay." I took a deep breath. "I believe Jason has been altering my medication." She blinked. "What?" "I have footage, records, logs. He's been calling pharmacies, changing doses, replacing pills. I saw him at the pharmacy with my medical file. That dinner last week, I swapped our wine glasses. He drank what he meant for me. I watched him sweat it out while I sat across the table." Her eyes narrowed. "Mom, are you hearing yourself?" "I have proof," I said, my voice steady. "I'll show you everything. I'm not asking you to believe me because I'm your mother. I'm asking you to look at the facts." She sat back, arms crossed. "You've never liked him." "This has nothing to do with that," I said, my hands trembling slightly. "This is about your safety. Mine. He's put himself on my medical file, my emergency contact list, even tried to get access to my legal documents." Her voice cracked. He wouldn't do that. He's taken care of you, driven you to appointments, picked up your meds." "Yes, that's how he did it." She stood, pacing now. "You sound paranoid. You sound sick." That cut deep. I looked up at her, tears pricking at my eyes. If I sound sick, then he's winning. "Mom, stop." She held up a hand. "You're spiraling. You've always been suspicious of men I've dated, and now you've convinced yourself I'm not imagining things. You're accusing my husband of poisoning you. Do you understand how that sounds?" "I understand exactly how it sounds," I said quietly. "But I also know what I saw, what I documented, and someday you will too." She stared at me, a war behind her eyes, and then she said it, the line I'll never forget. "You always find a way to ruin the good things in my life." I felt my heart crack. There it was, the truth she'd never said out loud. She didn't see this as protection. She saw it as sabotage, as jealousy, as interference. I had been preparing for denial, for pushback, but I hadn't been ready for that. "You think I want this to be true?" I whispered. "You think I wanted to discover that the man you love has been trying to kill me?" She said nothing, just stood there, arms wrapped tightly around her body like armor. "I raised you to think for yourself," I added, voice trembling, "to question what doesn't feel right. Please, Ellen, just take 1 hour, sit with me. Look at the evidence. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. I'll never bring it up again." She didn't move. "I can't," she said finally. "Not right now." And then she turned, picked up her purse, walked to the door. "I love you, Mom," she said, "but this isn't okay." And just like that, she was gone. The silence after she left was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Not even the tick of the wall clock could soften the ache in my chest. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the 2 untouched cups of tea. One of them was mine. The other was meant for someone who didn't believe me. It's strange, isn't it? How sometimes the betrayal doesn't come from the villain. It comes from the person you're trying to protect. That night, I added a final note to my digital folder. She doesn't believe me. Yet. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Jason was clever. He knew how to isolate me without lifting a finger. But I still had the upper hand, because now I wasn't trying to convince anyone. I was preparing for the moment when they'd have no choice but to believe me. There's a certain cold that settles in your bones after someone you love calls you a liar. It's not like anger. It's quieter, heavier, a kind of emotional frostbite. After Ellen walked out, I sat in the dark with my files open, the glow of the laptop screen lighting up the face of a woman who no longer trusted her own daughter. Not completely. I didn't sleep that night. Again, but when I woke up the next morning, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was focused. Jason thought he had me isolated. He thought Ellen would be my only line of defense. He forgot who I used to be. I hadn't always been just Mom. Before I raised a daughter and tended a garden, I worked as a records specialist for a federal office. I dealt with frauds, liars, people who thought they were cleverer than paper trails. Jason might have been clever, but he left trails. And I was going to follow them all the way to the motive. I called my lawyer, a man named Tom, whom I trusted like family. I asked him to review my legal documents, especially the old family trust Ellen had access to. He agreed, and within hours, he called me back. "Lorraine," he said, "has anyone been inquiring about estate disbursement if you pass away?" "No," I said slowly. "Why?" "There was a request last month for an updated copy of your trust documents. It was denied but flagged because it wasn't you who requested it." My stomach twisted. "Who was it?" "A man claiming to be your medical power of attorney, Jason Bennett." Jason had been laying the bricks for months, subtle ones. He wasn't trying to rush my death. He wanted it to look natural, expected. He wanted control of my legal affairs first, my medications second. That way, if something happened to me, it would be sad but inevitable. He didn't want to get caught. He wanted to get everything. So I pulled out the old binder I'd been avoiding since my husband passed, the one with the dusty life insurance policies and dormant bank accounts and safety deposit keys. Page after page of numbers, signatures, names I hadn't read in years. And that's when I found it. A life insurance policy I took out when Ellen was born, one I never canceled, one that still listed her and any legal spouse as co-beneficiaries. If I died, Ellen would get $500,000. Jason would get half unless she changed it. She never had. I stared at that paper for a long time. Jason didn't just see me as an inconvenience. He saw me as an opportunity. And in Ellen, he found the perfect tool. She loved him, trusted him. She didn't question his help, his kindness, his way of managing everything. I remembered the night she came to my house crying, saying how safe she felt with him, how he always checked on her, how he knew what she needed before she even asked. It had made me uneasy then. Now it made my skin crawl. Jason wasn't in love with Ellen. He was in love with control. And I was the last thing in his way. He'd already begun rewriting my story, one appointment at a time. A confused elderly woman, a heart condition, muddled memory, gradual decline. He even told the pharmacist I was having cognitive issues. The files, the calls, the fake authorizations, they all pointed to one truth. He wanted me to die quietly, and he wanted to get paid for it. But now I had something just as dangerous as his lies. Proof. I updated my will that week, removed Ellen as the sole beneficiary, temporarily, and put everything into a revocable trust in my name, set to go to a nonprofit scholarship foundation for single mothers if anything happened to me under suspicious or contested conditions. It wasn't to punish her, it was to protect her. Because if Jason knew there was nothing left to gain, he might stop. But if he thought she still had access, he'd keep pressing. I also authorized a health proxy, one that named Tom, my attorney, as the emergency point of contact. Not Ellen, not Jason. If I collapsed tomorrow, Jason would no longer be the one making decisions. And I made one final move. I wrote Ellen a letter. I didn't attack her. I didn't accuse her. I simply said, there are moments in life when we love someone so deeply, we miss the shadow behind them. I don't need you to believe me now. I only ask that you open this envelope if something ever happens to me and things don't feel right. Inside, you'll find everything I've learned and the truth I tried to show you. Then I sealed it, and I placed it in the drawer beside my bed because this story wasn't over. Jason was smart, calculating, but he had one fatal flaw. He thought I was weak, and that was going to cost him everything. They say revenge is best served cold, but I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth, served hot on a silver platter in front of every person Jason thought he had fooled. It was time for the final act, and I was going to write it myself. The pieces were already in place. I had the footage, the pharmacy records, the forged call logs, the altered pills, my updated will, and the newly secured power of attorney, safely tucked away in my lawyer's office. Now I needed one more thing, a moment where Jason felt safe enough to make one more move, one final confirmation of his intentions, and I would give him that moment, on my terms. So I invited them to dinner. At my home, I told Ellen I wanted to make peace, that I'd been feeling tired and emotional lately and that I wanted to apologize for overreacting. I told her I missed her, missed Jason, missed our little family dinners. And just like I expected, her relief was instant. "I'm so glad, Mom," she said. "Jason will be too. He's really been trying." Of course he had. I spent the next 2 days setting the stage. I pulled out the good china, lit candles, cooked a hearty lamb stew from my grandmother's old recipe, the kind that filled the whole house with nostalgia. Then I did something that made my hands tremble with adrenaline. I poured 3 glasses of wine, all from the same bottle. But I marked one of them with a microscopic scratch on the glass stem, Jason's, and then I waited. They arrived right on time. Jason in his perfectly pressed button-up, holding a bottle of wine I didn't need, and Ellen in soft blue, her eyes hopeful. We exchanged hugs, smiled, sat down, and I played my part beautifully. "I've been reflecting," I told them. "You two have been good to me. Maybe I've let my fear cloud my judgment. Jason smiled, but there was a flicker of caution in his eyes. I could see him scanning the table, the wine, the food, looking for signs. Had I really forgiven him? He picked up the marked glass and drank. 3 sips. 4. Delicious, he said. Full-bodied. I smiled. I thought you'd like it. Ellen relaxed across the table, her shoulders finally lowering. She reached for her wine, sipping slowly. I didn't touch mine. We ate, talked about the weather, the garden, Ellen's work. Jason, of course, offered to help me with some new online medical portals. It's confusing, I know. I could set it all up for you. His voice was syrupy sweet, but his eyes flicked to my glass again, still full. He was calculating, waiting. Halfway through dinner, I feigned a soft wince, pressed a hand to my forehead. "Are you okay?" Ellen asked. Jason leaned in slightly, eyes sharp. "I'm fine," I said gently. "I just feel a little dizzy." I pushed back my chair and stood. "I'll lie down for a minute. Ellen, could you come with me?" She was on her feet instantly. Jason stood too, but I waved him off. "I just need my daughter for this. You understand?" He smiled tightly. "Of course." We walked into the hallway, then up to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slow and shallow. Ellen held my hand. "I'm okay," I said softly. "But before we go back downstairs, I need you to see something." I reached into my nightstand and pulled out a tablet, opened the folder titled, "If Something Happens to Me." I pressed play. The video showed Jason in the guest room, replacing my pills. Then it cut to another night, him checking labels on my medication bottles. Then another, him calling a number from my contact list, saying he was my emergency proxy, trying to change pharmacy instructions. Ellen froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then came the footage from the pharmacy, Jason holding my medical file. "Mom," she whispered, "what is this?" I looked at her, tears in my eyes. "It's everything I tried to tell you. I didn't want to show you until I was sure." Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Jason appeared in the doorway. His expression shifted the moment he saw the tablet in Ellen's hands. He knew. In an instant, he knew. "Ellen," he said calmly, "what are you looking at?" She stood, stunned. "Is this real?" He looked at me, then back at her. "She's confused. She's been having these episodes I told you. She asked me to help manage her meds." "Don't lie to her now," I said, rising to my feet. The color drained from his face. And then came the knock at the door. I didn't flinch. Neither did Ellen. Jason turned toward the stairs, the calm slipping from his voice. "Who is that?" I stepped forward. "That's my lawyer and a detective. I invited them for dessert." Jason stared at me, his wine glass still in hand, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. And for the first time since he walked into our lives, he looked afraid. Jason didn't speak, not right away. He stood at the top of the stairs, wine glass frozen mid-air, eyes darting between me, Ellen, and the approaching knock at the front door. His brain was scrambling. The predator in him was calculating exit routes, but there weren't any left. "I don't know what this is," he said finally, trying to sound confused. "I don't know what she told you, but none of this is—" "Save it," I said sharply. My voice had steel in it now. No more sweetness, no more softness. "I gave you every chance to stop, to walk away, but you didn't, Jason. You kept pushing." Ellen slowly backed away from him, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Is it true?" He stepped toward her too quickly. "I need you to calm down," he said, forcing a smile. "You're being emotional. You don't know what you're looking at." "Don't talk to her like that," I snapped, stepping between them. The doorbell rang again. 3 sharp knocks. Jason flinched. He turned to the stairs. For a split second, I thought he might try to run, but it was too late. I walked past him and opened the front door. There stood Tom, my attorney, flanked by a plainclothes detective named Harris. I'd met him 2 days earlier and handed over the files. They both stepped inside without a word. Jason's face paled. Detective Harris was calm, controlled. He introduced himself, asked to speak to Jason in private. Jason, like the coward he was, started talking fast, trying to deny everything, spinning a story about how I was mentally unwell, paranoid, creating false accusations. But Harris didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone and played the audio I'd given him, the pharmacy call, where Jason impersonated me. Then the footage from the camera, Jason replacing my pills. Then a printed transcript of the fake emergency contact request. And finally, the bottle of altered medication I'd turned into the lab, the one with a sedative compound not listed in any legal formulation of my prescription. Jason's hand was shaking now, his words crumbling. "Look," he said, "I didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to help her transition. She's been struggling. You tried to kill her," Ellen said. Her voice was flat, hollow. Jason looked at her as if she'd slapped him. "I never would have, Ellen. Come on, you know me." Her face broke. "No," she said softly. "No, I don't. I don't know you at all." And then she did something that made my knees weak. She reached for my hand, held it tight, and turned to the detective. "I want to press charges. I want him out of our house. I want every document he touched rechecked, every account, every record Jason's mouth opened, but nothing came out, because he knew it was over." Detective Harris turned to him. "Jason Bennett, you're under arrest for attempted poisoning, medical fraud, and falsifying legal documents. You have the right to remain silent." The words echoed in the hallway as Harris cuffed him. Jason didn't resist, but he didn't stop shaking. He passed Ellen one last look, almost pleading. She didn't blink. They led him out the door. As the front door shut behind him, a wave of silence swept over the room. I felt dizzy, but not from fear, from relief. For weeks I had carried this alone. I'd built this case like a quiet warrior, holding my breath, watching my back, waiting for the moment when someone, anyone, would believe me. And now he was gone. For now. Ellen stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes glassy. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared. "I let him do it," she whispered. "No," I said gently, walking over to her. "He fooled you. He fooled us all." "But you saw it," she said. "And I didn't. I called you paranoid." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You believed what you wanted to be true. That's not weakness, that's love." She turned to me, and finally, tears. "I'm so sorry." And for the first time in what felt like years, she hugged me like my daughter again. Not as Jason's wife, not as someone on the defense, but as my little girl. We stood in the living room, holding on to each other like lifelines. I thought about all the nights I sat up alone, second-guessing myself. All the times I replayed his smile and wondered if I was imagining it. All the guilt I'd carried. Until now. And in that moment, it hit me. The collapse wasn't just Jason's, it was mine too. The fear, the silence, the restraint, they were gone. I'd taken back control of my life, of my story, and of my daughter. 2 days after the arrest, the phone calls started. Reporters, lawyers, Jason's family, most of whom had never liked Ellen, now suddenly calling her delusional for believing a senile old woman's fantasy. We didn't answer. Not one of them deserved our time. The detective, however, did call, with updates. Jason had been charged with attempted murder, identity fraud, medical impersonation, and intent to alter legal documents with malicious intent. Each charge came with its own weight. Combined, they made it clear this wasn't a mistake. This was a strategy, and Jason had planned it for months. They traced his online activity. He'd researched sedatives, insurance loopholes, dosage manipulation. He'd visited forums, bookmarked life expectancy charts for women with heart conditions. There were drafts of emails to my pharmacy, unsent but saved in his cloud. Jason didn't just act, he studied. He thought if he kept everything just outside the lines, just believable enough, no one would question a quiet, peaceful death. He forgot who he was dealing with. The day I walked into the courthouse to give my statement, I didn't wear black. I wore red. My late husband always said red made me look fierce. I wanted Jason to see me like that, not as the woman he almost silenced, but the woman who buried his entire plan under a mountain of receipts, recordings, and resolve. I didn't tremble once when I took the stand. The court was quiet. Jason sat just a few feet away in a wrinkled suit that no longer fit, his hair unkempt, his jaw tight. I told them everything, from the pharmacy sighting to the wine glass switch, from the pill inspections to the security footage. I laid it out piece by piece, calm, detailed, undeniable. At one point, I saw Jason shake his head slightly, still trying to look composed, still pretending he was misunderstood. But the evidence didn't lie. Neither did I. Then Ellen took the stand, and if there had been any doubt left in that room, she shattered it. She spoke about the manipulation, how Jason controlled her finances, how he discouraged her from seeing friends, how he made her feel like the only person she could trust was him. He didn't just try to erase my mother, she said. He tried to erase me. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Jason's defense lawyer didn't say much. They couldn't. The evidence had built a wall so high, even a skilled liar couldn't climb out. Jason didn't testify. He didn't look at me once. The judge called it one of the most calculated betrayals of familial trust he'd seen in years. Jason was denied bail. He's currently awaiting sentencing. They expect a minimum of 12 years. Could be more. But the legal side was only one piece of it. The pain didn't end there. Ellen couldn't sleep. She'd wake up in the middle of the night crying into the pillow in the guest room. My guest room. The one she used to tease me about for being so old-fashioned. Now it was her refuge. She kept blaming herself. I brought him into our lives. I'd hold her hand, and I got him out. She eventually stopped arguing. Slowly, she began to rewire her life. Bank accounts, passwords, everything. She found out Jason had maxed out one of her credit cards, tried to open a line of credit in her name. He even tried to put down a deposit on a property using a forged pre-approval letter. The Jason she loved didn't exist. He was a mirage, a carefully rehearsed role. And once the spotlight turned on, he fell apart. We both did a lot of grieving that month, not just for what almost happened, but for the people we used to be. I mourned the trust I once gave freely. I mourned the woman who second-guessed her instincts to keep peace, the mother who thought keeping quiet was safer than speaking up. Ellen mourned the version of her life she thought was real, but mourning is not weakness. It's the soil where strength takes root. One morning, as we sat on the porch with coffee, Ellen said, "You saved my life." I shook my head. "Number you saved your own. You just needed someone to hold the mirror up." She smiled faintly. "You didn't give up on me, even when I didn't believe you." "I'm your mother," I said. "That's not something I put down, even when it hurts." That afternoon, she drove to the lawyer's office with me. She co-signed the documents updating my trust again, restoring her place, but this time with layered protection. Not because I didn't trust her, because now she didn't trust the world the same way either. We agreed on something unspoken that day. No more blind spots, no more silences, no more being polite at the cost of being safe. Jason had wanted a quiet ending. Instead, he got a courtroom and two women who rebuilt each other from the inside out. Jason's sentencing took place on a gray Friday morning, the kind that feels like it holds its breath. The courtroom was full. Journalists, observers, even a few people from Jason's past who'd come forward after the news broke. Apparently, I wasn't the first woman he'd tried to manipulate, just the first who'd lived long enough and loud enough to prove it. Ellen and I sat together on the same bench, her hand in mine. She didn't wear black either. She wore navy, the color her father always said made her look unshakable. When Jason entered, shackled at the wrists, he looked smaller, not just in stature, but in spirit. The polished man with the sharp smile was gone. What stood before us was a hollow shell. He didn't look at us, not once. The judge was blunt. She listed the charges one by one, each one carrying a sentence of its own weight. Tampering with prescription medication, medical impersonation, attempted fraud, identity falsification, attempted murder. Jason's lawyer asked for leniency. The judge didn't grant it. She called Jason a predator in plain clothing. You targeted a woman who trusted you, who welcomed you into her family, and you used that trust to orchestrate her slow, controlled erasure. He was sentenced to 18 years, no parole for at least 12. The gavel struck. It was over. But here's what no one tells you about justice. It doesn't fix you. It doesn't reverse the nights you lost sleep or heal the words that broke you. It doesn't patch up the crack in your voice when your daughter told you you were imagining things. Justice is not a rescue. It's a reckoning. And even though Jason was led away in cuffs, the echo of what he tried to do didn't vanish with him. It lived in the pill bottles I still check twice a day, in the way I read every piece of mail twice now, in the way Ellen flinched the first time she heard someone knock unexpectedly. But it also lived in our strength, in the way we rebuilt, brick by brick, one quiet, painful conversation at a time. Ellen moved back in for a while, said it was just until things felt normal again, but we both knew. Neither of us really wanted to be alone just yet. We cooked together, laughed again, sat on the porch and played cards like we used to before life got complicated. She even started therapy, something Jason used to call a waste of time. She told her story too, to friends, to strangers, to herself in the mirror. That was the bravest thing of all. And me? I started writing, not just about what happened, but about women like me. About what it feels like to be dismissed, to be overlooked, to be called paranoid or dramatic when your gut is screaming that something's wrong. I wrote so others wouldn't wait as long as I did to listen to themselves. One of the first lines I ever typed was, "He thought I was weak." That was his first mistake. I had that printed on the front page of my binder, the same one I handed to the detective, the lawyer, the court, the same one that put Jason in a cell. The same one that reminded me who I really was. Months passed. Spring bloomed. Ellen eventually moved back into her own space. We still have dinner twice a week, sometimes 3. She laughs more now. Softer, yes. But it's real. One night, as we sat under the string lights in my garden, she said something that stayed with me. "You didn't just save your life, Mom. You saved mine too. I just didn't know I needed saving." I didn't respond right away. I just held her hand. Because that was enough. I'll never forget what Jason tried to do. I don't want to. Because remembering it means remembering how far I've come. Closure isn't always a pretty bow. Sometimes it's a scar that never quite fades, but no longer bleeds. It's the wine glass you pour for yourself, without fear. It's the breath you take knowing the worst already happened, and you're still here. It's hearing someone call you paranoid and smiling because you know better now. It's not waiting for someone to believe you. It's believing yourself. I keep the marked wine glass in my cupboard, not to scare myself, but to remind myself of the night I trusted my instinct, of the night I turned the trap back on him, of the night I refused to die quietly. Jason wanted me erased. Instead, I became unforgettable.